Hello world, this is Stefan of Lendrigan Games. If you play the game and enjoy it, I'd greatly appreciate subscribing to my Patreon. Link is also in the description. As of December 14th, the game can now be played start to finish with just the keyboard. The other update is that I've redone the inventory window so that in the future it can be sorted. It sounds like not a lot got done this week, but inside each update is a lot of moving parts. As well, for changing how the inventory is laid out, I spent a few days just trying to figure out how to make it work because I can't find any tutorials for the way I'm arranging it. As for this next week, I'm going to work on making the game playable with just the mouse, and after that working on sorting the inventory so that it becomes less cluttered. Before I go on my ramble, if you enjoy this game or cooperative gaming in general, I invite you to join the Lendrigan Games Discord. I don't really care about YouTube subscriptions because YouTube seems to be disregarding them anyway. I try to keep my rambles more strictly relevant to game development, but this topic does factor into the business side of things, wherein I have to remain open to the possibility that the audience at large doesn't care for what I offer. I'm also well aware that declaring failure on the most financially successful fiction story of all time sounds like quite the arrogant claim, but if you knew what Tolkien wanted to accomplish with The Lord of the Rings, you'd instinctively understand that no, it did not accomplish that. What was he trying to accomplish then? He wanted Lord of the Rings to be mythology. If you wish you had known that, don't blame yourself. His mission of providing a mythology for England is well documented, particularly in his 211th letter to Rona Bear, but it's not well publicized. His inspiration is decently publicized, though. If you look up Tolkien's opinion of France, you will come across his complaint that the Normans erased England's history of stories, which is why King Arthur is England's earliest and only mythology. You'd have to dig through his letters, though, to find the parts where he reveals that, more or less, the Silmarillion is his attempt at writing Norway's Prose Edda, but for England. To fully explain the failure, though, I need to define the word mythology closer to its original use, since casual use has boiled it down to just mean made-up story. The older definition that I'm using is that a myth is a non-fiction story that's wrong in its facts but true in its principles. Explaining this definition is easiest with Greek mythology because so many of its creatures are symbols, especially centaurs. As fantasy creatures, centaurs are merely humans mixed with horses, but as mythological creatures, centaurs are the struggle between man's higher thinking and his animal instincts. As such, centaurs are factually false because they don't exist, but true in principle because the struggle certainly does. In essence, mythology used to be how humans understood the world. Even though the details were off, the broader messages helped them survive. This brings us to why Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion failed to become mythology. The detail that Tolkien missed is that mythologies take hold in environments that lack tools for finding information. The more things that people can measure, the less they need mythology to understand the world. By the time of the Industrial Revolution, long gone was the environment where stories explain the world because science now does that explaining. As for why my game is going to fail, that could be any 12 of the small details I constantly miss.